Good morning. It's that time again. Looks like we just left here, didn't it? Time is flying. I guess I'm getting old. We're going to start this morning with a prayer. JD's going to lead us in that prayer, if he would.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you this day. Thank you for the blessings that have already been in it. We are thankful for this time that you have set aside for us to come and worship you and come and study more about you, study your word. We ask you to be with us this morning as we listen to Brother Davis, and that we may take the things he says, study upon them, meditate upon them, and research them for ourselves, and that we can apply them to our daily lives. We ask you to watch over us, keep us safe, and in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We're continuing our study in Isaiah, and I've decided, I think we have 4 more weeks. I decided we'll be where we are when we get to the end of that, because there's so much in here to learn and consider that I don't want to rush over anything trying to get to a certain point. So wherever I end, I'll make up for it next year, next October. This week we're going to look at chapter 14, where we're talking about the Lord taking care of Judah, taking care of his chosen people. And it starts out by saying, "For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob, will continue yet to choose them, and set them in their own land, and strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captive, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors." These couple of verses relate to us a promise to those that God had chosen, to the Israelites, that he's going to, at this time they're in exile. Babylon has already conquered them and taken them over to Babylon. And God said that he's going to send them back to their place. You remember, when Nebuchadnezzar had conquered them, he took them back and he made them slaves, made them, live under his oppressive tyranny. And God is saying, now I'm going to bring you out of that. I'm going to send you back to your own place. And later he says, I'm going to put you in your own land and breathe your own air. And that's a peculiar way of putting things, but when you're under oppression, there's always a constant sense of anxiety, like what is going to happen tomorrow. I have in my possession, somewhere in my collection of things, I have receipts from where my ancestors were sold into slavery on the auction block down in Sandersville. And with that comes the stories from my grandparents, and telling me stories about how they lived, how they survived. And when I read this, it reminded me of that. Hearing their stories, I couldn't imagine living under the conditions that they did. I mean, you're slaves. Your will is not your own will. Your will is the will of your master. Living from day to day, not knowing whether your family is going to be intact tomorrow because of the will of your master. If he wants to sell them or separate you in some way, you have absolutely no power over it. But the oppressive nature of it brought on that anxiety, brought on that sense of sadness. I mean, the sadness had to be permeating the air around them. So I can understand when Isaiah said through prophecy that these people were going to be taken back to their own land, and breathe their own air. The air of freedom is a little bit different than when you're in bondage. And one point to make here is, you won't find in the Bible where it tries to undo slavery. The prophets nor the apostles or Jesus got into the politics of that. But the interesting thing is that he took that relationship and made us his slaves. He took it on, as in many cases, he took the culture, used the example of that culture in describing our relationship with him. We are to be slaves with him. He is our master. Our will is his will. I thought that was an interesting point, in contrast to what some might try to use the scripture to support. But anyway, verse 1 through 3, he's going to bring them back to their land. And an interesting thing here he says, they shall take them captives whose captives they were. Those that oppressed them, whose power they were underneath, now they're being destroyed. And there's a lesson in this, not to rejoice in the failure or the fall of your oppressors. Taking the captives captive, those that were your captives, now you're taking them under your wing. And he says, they shall, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. They're going to take them under their wing, and they're going to rule over them, those that were their captors. And he says, it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow, from thy fear, from thy hard bondage, wherein thou hast was made to serve. Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king, this prophecy against the king. And the king is not named here, but it's talking about Nebuchadnezzar when you look at the timeline that they're talking about. Because that's an interesting point, but you could take out any king name and separate and replace it with any other king during this time, and the descriptors will remain the same. They were all oppressive. They were all, rebellious against God. They all practiced idolatry and all those kind of things. Hezekiah brought a change to that, but up until this point, all the kings were the same. You shall take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, had the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased. In Nebuchadnezzar's dream, he just had a dream of a figure. I call it a statue, just from the depictions I've seen. And at the top of that was the golden head, which represented Nebuchadnezzar, or represented Babylon. Because at that time, Babylon was a world-class city. Everybody wanted to be like Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar tried to make everybody under Babylonian rule. He was an empirical leader. He wanted to tear down cities and build them to his glory, to magnify his kingdom. And it says now, after his fall, it says, has the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased? Is that city no more? The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the ruler. You know, the king comes with his entourage into these cities. And Nebuchadnezzar said that he had so much power that he generated so much fear that, later on they'll say it made the earth shake. When leaders saw him coming with his entourage, they would literally get up. And they knew that resistance to him was futile. So they just got up and gave him their seat. They were no rulers no more, only in name, because Nebuchadnezzar decreed, he read them their rights basically and said, you will do what I say, taking them under his leadership. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted, and none hindereth. More effective leaders are that way because they have the honor, support, admiration of those who they lead, those who are under them. But it says here that Nebuchadnezzar ruled by anger. Everything was from the point of anger, point of covetousness, the point of imperialism. I want this, I'm going to take it. you will do what I say. He was so powerful that he had people do whatever he wanted to do, and he decided how people would even suffer. So he says here, describing his style of leadership, you rule from a point of anger. That is not, we got to remember that God is the author of authority. Whatever level of authority we have, God is the author of that. And we are accountable to God. We say that we're accountable to the people. Yes, we are as leaders. But we are accountable to God because God instituted that authority, that part of us as humans who need that leadership, who rely on that leadership, who rely on the care and comforts of that leadership. We here in the United States rely on our government. We rely on the comforts of being an American. We rely on that. We have a sense of pride. I've been around the world. And to say, it is no small thing to say in a foreign country where I've been, in Mexico, Japan, Europe, China, all those places, to say you're an American, that takes with it a certain amount of weight. And I realize when I'm there that I am the only representation that some people have seen of the United States, so I have to conduct myself in a certain way. But the point here is that Nebuchadnezzar ruled from a point of anger, and that is not the way that God intends for his leaders or any leader, because he instituted authority. We as humans are wired to look for authority. We are wired to look for something greater than ourselves. And leaving it up to our own imagination, even from the old times, even where we're talking here, they built their leadership through idols and idol worship and through gods and things like that. But this is an important point in describing the type of leadership that Nebuchadnezzar and all the kings, most of the kings before him, how they ruled. They ruled from a point of anger, not taking the care and concern of their constituents or their subjects in mind. He smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, always oppressing. He that had ruled nations in anger is persecuted and none hindered. There's nobody going to stop him. Even in his entourage, what they call a retinue, you know, when a king is attacked, whether his character or otherwise, there would always be some who come to his defense. It says here that none hindered. He's going to have to suffer this fall by himself. He's going to have no support. All of that support that he had during his leadership, all of those subjects that wrote those edicts and codified it so that the people had to follow it, you would think that they would come to his defense. He says, none hinder it. Nobody's going to stop. Nobody's going to come to your defense. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Like I said earlier, Babylon was a world-class city. Anytime they saw even emissaries from Babylon, people trembled. They got nervous because they knew they had no recourse but to follow whatever was coming from Nebuchadnezzar. He says here, the whole earth is at rest. Now that Nebuchadnezzar has fallen with his mean-spirited leadership, the whole world is at rest. They have no fear. Babylon is gone. Earlier it said that golden city, is it ceased? Really, is it? It's like when I go back to this example because I started with it, but with slavery. That's why we celebrate Juneteenth, because some people didn't get the message that slavery was over for years later. And they couldn't believe it when they finally got the message. So they couldn't believe that Babylon was gone. He said the whole earth is that's just the extent of his leadership. The world was defined by what went on in Babylon. And now they're saying Babylon is no more, and the whole world is at rest. Verse 8, yea, the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon, saying, since thou art laid down, no feller is come upon us. Again, his leadership. Since Nebuchadnezzar has fallen, dethroned, abdicated, whatever the word you want to use, these people can breathe a sigh of relief. And it's saying even the trees can rejoice because he's not felling them or cutting them down to build whatever edifice that he wants to build. And it's using that figuratively because of the leaders that resigned their seat to give to Nebuchadnezzar. Now they can rule in earnest. It says, since you left, nobody's ever even attacked us. Hell from beneath is moved. And to be moved really means just to be excited for several reasons. For they meet thee at thy coming. Isn't that something? Isn't that a sight to behold, being welcomed into hell? That's just how bad you had to be. In our modern day vernacular, we would have a celebration, a parade to welcome him. That's just, that just got my attention there. That's just how bad he was. He says, for they're moved, they're excited to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nation, all those people, all those kings, all those rulers that he dethroned. They're there. They're looking for him, awaiting his arrival. All they shall speak and say unto thee, are you become weak as we? Are thou become like unto us? They're remembering how he treated them. They're remembering how he ruled over them. They remember how oppressive he was. They remember the agony, the pain, the burden that they experienced under him. And all that power they'd had just at his word. They're saying now, are you just as weak as we are? There's nothing different between you and me now that you're here. Can you imagine that? The fall from the very high. They often say our president is the most powerful person in the free world. If you commiserate that with Nebuchadnezzar, he's fallen from that to nothing. Nothing. And he was so bad that even in hell, they were excited at his coming. They believed there was, in fact, justice. Are you become as weak as we? You have no power. You have no pomp. You have no circumstance. You have no exaltation. As Nebuchadnezzar says, and we're going to get to this, but he says, I am going to be exalted above the stars. He says, as far as heaven is from the earth, I'm going to exceed that. So he even thought he should have been deified or made a saint after his death. That was the enormous amount of pride that he had in himself. He trusted in himself. He trusted in his riches. He trusted in his span of control to exalt himself even before God. God says that nobody's going to be exalted before me. Nobody's going to be exalted above me. Thy pomp is brought down. Your exaltation is brought down to the grave. No matter how high we get in this life, when we are dead, it's all over as far as that's concerned. It says, thy pomp is brought down to the grave. Nobody's going to remember you. Nobody's going to fear you. Nobody's going to exalt you. They just said, are you as weak as we are? You're nothing now. Your pomp, your circumstance, your pride, all of those things are brought down to the grave with you. And the noise of the vials of the worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. He didn't even get a proper funeral. It's saying here that you're going to be eaten as worms just like we are. And that's one thing we got to remember. No matter how much time, energy, and effort we put in preserving this body, it's going to fail us one day. One day it's just going to fail us. My dad was 93 years old when he passed away, and in our last few conversations, he said, where did the time go? Where did the time go? We spent all this time. Some of us want to live forever. Some of us want to, preserve the body. But just remember, it's a good thing to take care of yourself, obviously. But, there's a point that we have to realize that this is all going away. Everything we see, feel, touch, smell, hear is going away. It's going away. That's just a point for us to remember when we're thinking about Nebuchadnezzar, because he thought in his power that he not could live forever, but he thought that his exaltation, that his name would live on, that the fear of him would live on. But these people are reminding him or telling him, you are no better than we are. You are as weak as we are. All of that pomp and circumstance you had has followed you here, and we don't even regard it. Furthermore, your body's going to be eaten with worms, just like ours are up there wherever they're buried. How are you falling from heaven, O Lucifer? Now, this is a point of contention with a lot of scholars. The word Lucifer does not mean Satan. The word Lucifer just means star. Who said that? The word means star, that's right, or morning star. That's all it means. And it is describing Nebuchadnezzar because that's who he thought he was. The world rotated around him. In the old days, stars were important because that's how sailors and mariners navigated. So he's thinking that the world, it revolves around him. Whatever they need, however they want to rule, they patterned it after Babylon. So that's what it's saying here. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? The one that said that he is a star. He's going to be above the constellations, son of the morning. And it says actually right there what it means. How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken all nations? Again, all of that power you had, all of that control you had, now you're just weakened down to the ground. For thou hast said in thine own heart, I will ascend into heaven. Here it is. I will exalt mine throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. That is quite a mouthful. That's quite an amount of pride that he had, believing himself to be that powerful, that influential, that just raw power he thought he had, he thought he deserved, he thought he had earned. That's the convoluted thinking that he had. Are there any questions or comments? None? Jim.
Yeah, you mentioned, about slavery and oppression and, and just the wickedness of King Nebuchadnezzar. And a lot of times, even in our own culture, we mentioned this last week, there are a lot of different things that confront us.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's difficult to try and find, sometimes it's difficult to find, what God is promising us.
Mm-hmm.
That we won't be sorrowful, when we have fear, or, these things because of the oppression. And obviously the things that you're talking about are obviously must be just mind-boggling to have documentation on. So what is your, what do you think God's trying to teach us in relation to things that, in relation to culture and how we handle that?
We're talking about the remnant. From the beginning of Isaiah, it said that they're going to be cut down and the stump is going to be left that's going to survive. And out of that comes a sprout from the lineage of David. But through all of this machinations, the wars, the destruction, all of these things, there's a powerful remnant that is still remaining faithful to God. With all of the noise, this talks about noise of battle. All of that going on around you, you are still remaining faithful. The Bible exalts the poor. They exalt the humble among us. Jesus said the poor will always be among us. Jesus even in the Beatitudes, he says, blessed are the pure in spirit, the pure in heart. So how do we stay focused just like that remnant did? Last week I talked about how the church is whatever the word is, diversifying, you know. And now I call it a remnant within a remnant. But there has to be focus. There has to be reliance upon God. These people, this remnant, relied upon God's promises. Christ said, I will be with you always, even unto the end of the world. Meaning, whatever happens to you, just like God told these people, though I may seem to reject you, he wasn't rejecting them. He was rejecting their actions, their rebellions, their disobedience. But he said, I will never forsake you. That's where our heart lies, in that promise. You either believe, I'll get to you in a second. You either believe it wholeheartedly or you don't. That's how we remain faithful to the promises. This Isaiah is a whole pattern of destruction, deliverance, destruction, deliverance, destruction, providence, destruction, guidance. That is the pattern that has been set for us to follow. Even when you come to the New Testament, he says, if you're persecuted for my name's sake, you have nothing to worry about. You got to think about this. When we think about, all of the things that are going on in the world, what is the point? What is the source? What is the focus of our worry? If you really think about it and if you're really honest with yourself, it is this body. Am I going to suffer? Am I going to be killed? Am I going to, be in chains or whatever? We're worried about this body. But with what's within this body, our heart, our soul, the corazon, that place from where all of our values and concerns originate. If that is filled with God, if the world is against us, we still have no worry. Because as I started out saying, no matter what we do to preserve this body, take care of it, it's still going to fail us. Whether at 50 or 100 years, it's still going to fail us. But that soul, that part that lives in us forever, that should be the source of our worry. That's how we get through all of the distractions that we have and have always been. I'm going back to that example of slavery. Can you imagine not having a will of your own and it being codified in law where you have to do what your master says? You have no will of your own. They tell you how to feel. We talked about pain all the time. From some of the stories that I heard, they would give birth in the field and go right back to work. Give the baby to someone else to take home and take care of. That's a horrible existence. But even in all of that, they sang spiritual songs, relying on God to get them through it. That's how we do it. Mario? I didn't mean to wake you up, sorry. Yeah.
But as I'm hearing all these things, I'm reminded of, how does this apply to us? Jim's question is pretty good. If you think about that, all of us, every single one of us, somebody looks up to us.
Yeah.
Whether it's you're a parent, parenting, and you got children, or you're a boss, or you're a teacher, or you're an elder. In the church, you have leadership. In the world, you have bosses, on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about how these words ring out so loud, how we got to watch our character, because many of us will probably never see us being like Nebuchadnezzar. But if you have an oppressive father, an oppressive mother, an oppressive boss, if you have brothers that are prideful, haughty, and I look at my life,
Right.
But we may be practicing that and not even know it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're gonna be part of that remnant, we have to realize, well, how is this gonna apply to me?
Mm-hmm.
How can I exalt others rather than myself?
Mm-hmm.
How can I make sure that I'm not having idols and worshiping God properly? So you're covering a multitude of people. This hits every one of us.
Yeah, that's why I'm not worried about getting to chapter 39. I'm trying to, I want to mine as much as I can, or as much as we can, because I'm learning with you, as much as we can from this study as we go. I don't want to gloss over anything in the interest of time. So wherever we are, the last of December, the last Sunday, okay, wherever we are then, that's where we'll be. And I hope along the way you will have learned something. Jim, wait, did somebody else have a hand up? Oh, yeah. Yeah, Dino. he was first.
We got to understand too, the words we use there, slavery to man is a horrible, reprehensive thing, but slavery to God
Yeah.
is a wonderful thing. We have to, when we talk about oppression, God is not oppressive, okay? But we are slaves. You know, Paul said, I make myself a slave to Christ.
Yeah.
So, yes, to man, bad, but to God,
It's great.
it's a good thing.
Great. Because God gives both sides of it. How to act toward your master and how a master is to act toward the slave. When the church was new, you would have masters and slaves worshiping in the same congregation. They actually had a problem of the master doing service within the group of new Christians where their slaves were. You know, that's where pride comes in. I am the owner. I shouldn't be serving you. I shouldn't have to serve you. But Paul in 1 Peter dealt with that from both sides. Pray for those that despitefully use you and all that. That's what he was talking about, describing the rightful relationship between. Even as we go on here, he's going to say, you're talking about influence, Mario. It's going to come up here. Taking the captive. When Nebuchadnezzar took over Judah, he took those Jews out in the exile. Now they're coming back. God promised he's going to bring them back. And he says that people around you are going to be so enamored with the way that God has treated you, the way that he's provided for you, that they're going to want to come with you. Now, this says a lot for those people. It says a lot for the remnant. For however long I've been under your control, I've been under your foot, I've been under your thumb, I've been doing whatever you told me to do, and you've treated me wrong. And now, because of the way God has treated me, I am supposed to sincerely invite you into the fold. I am to bring you into, that's where the term Jews come from, not a nation. It's those that followed Christ. Now I'm supposed to, as this is saying here, take you into the fold. Now he says that these people were so enamored with the way that God treated them, they would have come under any circumstance. They would have taken the lowest job. And in this case, Isaiah is telling them to take them and use them as slaves. But then he said, don't rejoice in their fall. And the lesson here is, don't seek revenge against people who are coming up against you, but those that are coming up against God and his people. See, we're supposed to be so spiritual, so Christ-like, that when people are against us, they are against God. Not our personal egos, not our personal pride, not our personal desires, all those things that might contrast or conflict with somebody else. If they're coming at you after, in that sense, then you deal with it. But if they're coming after the church, if they're coming after God, then you rejoice in their fall. See what I mean? I'll never get to chapter 39. Any more questions or comments? Where was I, Mario? Oh, Jim. Did I get to you?
See, that's why you gotta be part of the old timers.
Just because I meet with y'all don't mean I'm old. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly, again, you mentioned back from slavery. I don't want to focus on that, the American.
Well, focus on it. That's our relationship.
But I think, even with the slaves going in the oppression that they were under, they had and focused on being spiritual.
Right.
There's this thing they call the spirituals, which are songs that
Yeah.
they would sing
Yeah.
to remain focused on God and to know, to be essentially to try and be part of a remnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, when we're trying ourselves, trying to look to how to do that, there are examples.
Yeah. Remember back in chapter 13, he said that God is my salvation and my song. That's what he's talking about. God is our way of salvation. He is our, through him we are saved. But the salvation part of it is the song, is the rejoicing, is the jubilation in knowing that I am a child of God. That should serve as a sense of spiritual pride to us. 1 Peter 2:9, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people. So much so that you should show forth the praises of him that brought you out of darkness into his marvelous light. When we talk about darkness, this is the period we are in Isaiah. See, these people, earlier I said, I can't imagine living like my relatives, my ancestors did, nor can they imagine me living with the freedoms that I am now. And I say that to say this, make this point. The people that Isaiah is talking to, that remnant, they didn't get the full gospel as we have it. They know that to follow God is to follow God and to trust him to do whatever. Isaiah is giving them a prophecy, giving them something to look forward to. But we realize it. If someone described a building that you should visit, and to get there, you're going travel through the night. You got your light, and you're shining it on your path, following directions to get to that building that they describe in so many words. To get there, you haven't realized it, but you're on your way there. When you get there, the first thing you're going to do is remember the description that they gave you. You're going to, it's a big, beautiful building. It's lighted. It's whatever words they use. Well, Isaiah is that flashlight pointing them through the darkness. That qualified in his prophecy. Remember the description he gave that Christ's kingdom is going to be ruled with peace. He's going to be ruled with justice. When he speaks it, it's going to be just. We don't have to worry about whether he has ulterior motives or any of that. His rule is just. So the darkness is where Isaiah is operating. But he's shining that light to the kingdom that is to come. That we should show forth the praises of him that brought us out of darkness into his marvelous light. Now we know what it's all about. We know what all of these machinations that God did, from the original sin, even up until now, but more specifically in the Old Testament, it was all about God doing what he needed to do to protect that remnant once he chose them. To protect that remnant and to give the heathens or the barbarians, anybody that wasn't an Israelite, wasn't his chosen, give them an impression of how he treats those that follow him. That's the whole of the Old Testament. That's the whole of it. God chose them, and from that point on, he provided for them. Other people saw how providential the Israelites were. They wanted to be a part of it. That you know, you talk about how we live today. That's what we should have as our mantra. Not going to the hilltop shouting it, bringing attention to yourself, but as you go about your daily lives, somehow, some way, we need to show others that we are a child of God. And they notice, trust me, they notice. But some way, somehow, remember in the early church, they were singing and praying daily, studying the scriptures daily, and other people noticed it, and they wanted to be a part of it. Romans 12:1, come you out from among them, be transformed from this world. How different do we look? I go back to the example I gave about the church now. We look so much like those that we are the denominational world, that we are losing our argument. We really are. How can we separate ourselves when we look so much like them in every way? There are some people in the church that cannot say that you have to be a member of the church to be saved. They can't bring themselves to do that. And we talk about distraction. And a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the power of love. Because of the love of some, husband, wife, sister, brother, mother, father, aunt, cousin, friend, we can't make that claim because of the love that we have for them. There are some people who won't become members of the church because their mother, father, sister, brother, whatever, they passed on and they weren't in the church. So that love, deep and abiding love that they have for them, won't allow them to say that. But that love that is forbidding us to say that is the love that we should have for God and His word that gives us the strength and power to say that. Christ died for His church. Even in the example of the remnant, God took care of them. And those who fought against the church or against the remnant are destroyed. They're destroyed. We're going to, in chapter 15, Moab, He gave Moab a little bit of reprieve. They weren't totally destroyed, but Moab is used as an example of how to treat those that were once your subjects. Once you were ones that they had aught with Israel all the time, even though they were distant related through Ruth, but they had contention with them. And any time that they could, they would bring them under their control and use them as slaves and mistreat them and things like that. But Moab is going to be told, you have to stop that. Consider the fact that Nebuchadnezzar, if he had repented when Daniel told him to, in the way that Daniel told him to, things would have been a whole lot different. But he chose not to. Moab is in the same shape. If you had treated Israel the way that you were supposed to, you wouldn't be in the position you're in now. But God didn't totally destroy them. He left them so that they could put into practice that lesson that He's trying to teach them. 1 minute left. Who wants to take it? Leslie.
I'm going to give you a gift.
Uh-oh.
Last week, Mike gave you 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a whole nother week. You said there were 4 weeks left. I got 5.
Oh, okay. I'll take it. I think that's a good place to end now, because if I start talking about verse 17, it'll go till tape finishes. So thanks again for your attention. Thanks again for your comments. And I really hope that we're learning from this study. It's a very important study. A lot of lessons in there directly related to our lives as the chosen of God, as the church of God. So thanks again.